All right. I hope you're ready for 35 minutes of talking. Um, Hello everyone. Nobody here. Uh, this is one video in a two-part series about Raikitamatsu. This one will be covering a problematic behavior of theirs that I feel has actively hampered the growth and health of the Avali community. The other video, well, potential video, will be their behavior towards me personally and how they behaved during the Avali army's deletion, because there's a lot to talk about there. Uh, and the purpose of that would be to like clarify some misrepresentations of me, because I was egregiously misrepresented by them and their tendency to villainize, which you'll probably see going through this video anyway. Okay, yeah, that said, this video is not that, and it's talking about the stories of other creators in the Avali space who've been getting bothered by Raikita whenever one tries to break into the Avali modeling space. So I'll be keeping this video focused on others out of respect for them having come forward with the information they did. The last portion of the video will be dealing with Kita going so far as to say that an avatar is AI, so, stick around. One note, I won't be reading out every single screen cap in its entirety, and some of them will give you additional context if you decide to pause and read them, but to respect your time, because this is already going to be very long, I won't be reading everything. If I leave out some fact verbally that you can clearly see in the screenshot, that's not intended to make it look worse or more favorable for me. I'm just keeping the scope and length of the video pinpointed to the issue that I want to talk about. So there'll be like an instance where Kita compliments someone or something. I lift in as much of the context as I reasonably can with the screen caps. That said, let's establish what the heck I'm talking about first. When I say a problematic behavior from Kita, I'm talking primarily about, to use a simple but fast example, the story that was told to me by Rosebur, wherein they were directly asked to show proof that their Aerogen, a model they made, did not contain any parts of the Dovali base. It was an accusation levied by Dashi on behalf of Raikita, who at the time had already blocked Rosebur before the questions came in from Dashi. Apparently, the accusation came because Rosebur used the same naming convention on a part of their avatar armature, which was also a bog standard Unity armature naming scheme. Like ARM 2, whatever, friggin' that crap, Now, Rosebur himself suspected this accusation, and the Twitter block came because Kita was suspicious after Rosebur used the Dovali as a base proportion to make the initial face mask and armor for their Aerogen earlier in the project. But the Aerogen was then built without any of the Dovali assets thereafter. It was just used as a proportionality measurement for, again, the face mask and the chest. Chest armor. I'm only lightly touching this story because it never creeped into the public realm like the other three I'll be mentioning today. I just wanted to use it sort of like an anecdote to help you understand. There were two other stories that I found that were very similar to Rosebur's, where a creator made something of Ollie, and then there was suspicion and low-key accusations of plagiarism from Raikita directly or indirectly. But those two creators, opted to stay anonymous and didn't want their stories shared for fear of brigading, and I don't really blame them. That's totally fair. I respect those wishes. These were both people who wanted to contribute to our community, the Avali community, and the Avali, give us avatars. And then they got chased off by these shenanigans from Kita. So this is a repeat behavior, and I think once we get through these other three bigger stories, you'll see why I say that. I'll also touch on why I think it's more than just someone being an asshole, and it creeps more into competition suppression. So, all right. Public instance number one. This one is also shorter, so I moved it up front. Drak, or Drakius. Drak is a creator who goes around making robot versions of existing species with the intention of building their shapes and geometry from scratch with their girlfriend off of existing models. Always asking permission from the original creator before taking on such endeavors, of course. So, for instance, If they had a kobold that they were going to make a robot version of, they'd do it from scratch. For the entire thing, they'd make it shaped in such a way that assets made for the original kobold model that it's based off of or inspired off of will fit with just minor tweaking. So like hoodies and bracelets and stuff, you'd only have to like minorly like nudge them in Blender or whatever. As far as I'm aware, I'm not really a model expert, but Drak, at the time this story occurred, would choose their next potential work option through public polls from their followers. In this case, Avali won, and then Raikita's avatars won in the follow-up as the popular pick to get robotified variants of. Again, made from scratch. When Drakus asked Kita about if they would be alright with them making something similar shaped to the KitaVali, they said no, which is completely within Kita's right. What wasn't very nice was what came after. Drak expressed on Twitter that they won't be doing the KitaVali and described it as a big fat no and that they might have offended Kita. That was the extent of the tweet. Okay, so what's the problem, Noda? Well, Kita, in all their sterling wisdom, decided to make this post on their Discord. Quote, "My response, the answer to both the Dovali and KitaVali is no. I will not let people commercially piggyback off of either avatar bases in this way. It would make for much less awkwardness in the future if you asked before including avatars and polls for things like this." Unquote. At this point, you can see Kita say something really interesting. They say they don't want to muddy up the rules and allow commercial lookalikes of their avatars. Just keep that in mind for later, but for now, they kind of go on this tangent where they're bringing up people asking to deform and resell assets that are a part of their avatar, which is not related to what Drak was doing at all. I think that including this tangent was an intention to imply that that's what they do, and that's backed up by the last portion and its potential sarcasm. Quote, "Drakus appears to be able to make their own stuff." So he can make his own stuff. This is not a community that he contributes to in any form. He is not even in the server for the KitaVali. Had he asked first, or even read the rules for the avatar before making a poll including them, this nonsense would have been avoided. Unquote. Okay, so not the coolest thing to do. Subtly imply that he doesn't do his own work, and then at everyone in your 8,000 person Avali server about it, going so far as to claim he doesn't contribute to the community when you literally just shot them down from wanting to contribute by giving them a dressing down over some responses to a Twitter post that did not directly insult you at all. You turn that into attacking him personally and partying him with people who resell paid models. That's really not cool. Doing an at everyone to name and shame someone encourages them to get harassed in DMs and definitely makes it so they'll never be contributing to the Avali community again, because now we all look like assholes thanks to that. And that's the truth, because, Drakus made a follow-up on their own Discord apologizing for the uproar and misunderstanding that seemed to be going on, explaining the full context as I recited it earlier. To my knowledge, Kita did not apologize for their part in responding to this question, and then a fairly mundane tweet from Drak that wasn't intended as an attack, just informing his followers he'd not be making an Avali avatar and why. Excuse me, I need water. Holy, we're gonna cut that out. Okay. Okay. Now, example number 2 is a bit less dramatic, but it's good for accenting what I believe most of this bad behavior from Kita comes from. So first, I'm going to just quickly read off their TOS on derivative works and how they define a derivative work of, say, the KitaVali. This will be important going into story 2. Quote, "Derivative works need to be credited as a KitaVali derivative and cannot be sold or redistributed as new avatars. Avatars heavily based on the appearance of the avatar, but without using the base mesh, are still derivatives. Basically the equivalent of tracing an avatar. Don't do this. I've seen it happen a few times recently, and it's pretty shitty to do. Doing this will get you named and banned." Unquote. Okay, so 1, they will name and shame for this. They consider 2, they consider original, from scratch work that looks too close to their avatars as derivative and worthy of this classification. They are worthy of name and shame. I'm going to put up 2 pictures side by side really quick. And I want you to tell me which one of these are an original depiction of an Avali. Okay? You've had a couple seconds. The 2D art is. The 2D art is original Avali art. It is official. It is featured on the Avali wiki. It is posted by Ryujin Zero, and Ryujin Zero is the creator of the Avali species. The picture on the left is the SpiriVali, made by Kita, one of the models that Kita says if it's copied too closely, it's derivative and plagiarism. My question to pose to you now is if I blacked out the Kita Avali model image right now, and I told you to make a 3D model of an Avali with these two references of original art, would it end up looking close enough to count as derivative? So ask yourself that question. All right. I'm going to give you another example. Here's the Avali and more official art of an from the Avali wiki. Here's more official art with feather detailing. Compare it to the Avali's sideburn and top feathers. Okay. So here's another image of an armored Avali. I could keep going if I really wanted to. There's more comparative images I could stitch together. I could have bothered matching exact poses and letting you judge from there, but my point is, if somebody makes an Avali avatar and it ends up close to one of Kita's Avali bases, that's not proof that they're plagiarizing, or that it's derivative in the way that they describe it. It also begs a question about Kita's comment publicly to Drak about not wanting commercial lookalikes, because this look that they're describing that they don't want commercial lookalikes of is just the look of an Avali, you know? The Avali and Kita and Jerry are all roughly bearing an 80% or more resemblance to original Avali art. And Avali are now on a Creative Commons license as far as I'm aware. It'd be like Nintendo making an open license Pikachu, having Kita make a Pikachu model, and then ass blasting people for making a Pikachu model that looks too close like Kita's Pikachu. That's not how this works. You know, if a boy sits down in an art gallery and they start sketching or molding pottery off of the art pieces they find inside, that's not tracing as Kita's TOS implies. And equating it as such and name and shaming them over it is worse, right? Now, we can segue into the second example, the Floofvali, which actually got a re-release for free with a huge update on Gumroad, so, maybe check it out. I think it looks pretty cool, I guess, I like Avali models. This one's the SpiriVali, by the way. It's pretty neat. Anyway, sorry. Floof is an example of a creator who actually did contribute to Kita's community and was active in their Discord, unlike Drak, which seemed to be one of Kita's hangups. From a quick glance through Floof's Discord, they made no less than 5 clothing and armor bundles for Kita's avatars. That was their contribution to Kita's avatar community stuff. They made clothing and stuff. So what is it that caused the issue? Floof started working on their own original Floofvali, and during that process, they posted work in progress of it in Kita's Discord. Kita engaged with Floofy by asking them to post an image of the topology of the Floofvali avatar, which was, as self-admitted, a means of seeing if Floofy had stolen any Avali topology in the making of the Floof. Again, another example of them getting uppity about plagiarism that isn't there. In this case, it was actually happening in a public channel in Kita's Gremlin House Discord. Once Floof posted the work in progress, they got bombarded with a lot of mean-spirited comments about their ability to model, how unoptimized it was, how messy the topology was, how they didn't know what they were doing. Keeping in mind that this was Floofy's first model. This was their first go at it. And it wasn't done. It was work in progress. That said, in the aftermath, Floofy made a post saying they wouldn't be posting work in progress in there anymore, and to catch any other work in progress of the Floofvali on their Discord instead, posting a link to it and explaining that those harsh comments were uninvited, right? That comment that Floof made was then deleted by Kita because it included the link to the other Discord. Now, to Kita's credit, they actually did speak with Floofy in private about it after, but took the opportunity to say that Floofy's reaction was unwarranted and too far, while explaining that their intention indeed was to check for plagiarism when they asked about the topology, mentioning they've created a new feedback channel in regards to models to avoid that happening in public again. They split model feedback and the original model channel into different things because apparently that's how you fix it. But I don't know the politics. All right. I do want to note, though, that there's no apology or admittance of a mistake on Kita's part for making this a public issue in this message. And instead, they put the fault on the community and then on Floofy for reacting to the community members, even though Kita admits that what the community members did were actionable offenses, right? You can see at the bottom that they compliment Floof, but if I were in that same situation, I'd be very bittersweet since it came on the heels of, oh, well, I thought you were stealing, but now you aren't, so good job. It's just not cool. So why am I being so persnickety about pointing out these instances? Because in the two relevant stories, and even the private one I indicated, again, there's no admittance of wrongdoing or sorry so far, right? They just see a model that's close to their own, and they talk to Dashi about it, who then accuses the person about it. Or in the case of Floof, they don't seem to understand that topology hunting in public of all things is a problem. You're kind of low key accusing them in front of all of your users. Like, what the fuck is that? To a degree, this has happened to every Avali model maker I made contact with about this subject in my investigation. In some shape or form, this has happened to every single one I talked to. Not all Avali creators, I'm sure, but enough so that the problem behavior is now very clear to me that Kita is gatekeeping us from people making shit that looks like the original Avali art on the wiki. Kita even mentions in Floof's DMs that they appreciate that Floof decided to change the head feathers to look less like the Davali, which, again, looks similar to head feather styles you could find on the official wiki. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to laugh. It is in exasperation. I've done a couple takes, and I am a little afraid from having to deal with this. This is silly. But I think it's important enough that I'm going to, I'm powering through here. You can look at these instances and say they aren't a big deal individually. But when you group them all together, now you have a repeat behavior, okay? And you have behavior that doesn't improve between instances, okay? There's no sign of them getting better about it. It's just getting worse. I believe the final example that will be coming in a bit is actually the most recent example, and it is by far the worst one. If someone has beef with one or two creators in a niche community like this one, it's not a big deal. When you've somehow managed to block or break contact with or accuse and cause friction and people to leave the community over and over and over and over again, I start asking, why is the common denominator you, Kita, right? Why is it I was able to track down 6 creators who all had stories like this in a week and a half of light investigation? How many more stories are out there? There's enough plausible deniability in all these instances when they're alone that they're just mistakes or you had a bad day or whatever, but not when they're all together. Why are we letting the owner of the biggest Avali-centric Discord left after the loss of, Avali army do this shit? And why are we letting them do it to new creators who are trying to come into the space? Why do they need to be scrutinized and looked at with a magnifying glass by one of the biggest names in the Avali VR chat community, expecting them to prove innocence instead of you proving the guilt of their plagiarism? And at that, why is Kita, someone who has a vested interest monetarily in chasing off competition, the one who gets to gatekeep? They make money off of Avali models. They simultaneously do this thing where they bother other Avali model creators about plagiarism. That is a conflict of interest, and a serious one. Why should we stand for that? Does anyone like that Kita does this to people who want to contribute to our communities? Seriously? Can anybody honestly tell me that that is a behavior that's good? So, with that, we'll move on to my final example, which is a bit more lengthy to accent my point. I feel the best way to tackle this particular one is to just quote the creator of the SpiriVali when I asked them for the story on this issue. Their name is Hiyu, and from what I can tell speaking with them in person and DMs, they seem like a sweet person. Now, we had a bit of back and forth, so I'll be showing snippets of that conversation as I reference them, but first, the big quote. Quote, Hiya. Originally, when SpiriVali was in its early stages, I was awaiting receiving my kidney transplant and experimenting with the model. And also, when I was more ignorant of the generative AI issues, I used an AI-generated Avali image as a reference for the face. Not only that, but I followed the reference very closely, at least for the front view look. Several months after the transplant, I picked the project back up and wanted to make it into a product, but I had forgotten to remove/redo this aspect of the model. I had grown to really hate generative AI at this time. That artist you mentioned, Rai, messaged me on Twitter with their concerns, somewhat impolitely, though this is understandable, as the AI model had been trained on screenshots and renders of their avatars. And I agreed that I had made a mistake, and asked how to proceed, as I no longer felt comfortable releasing the avatar with this knowledge. I mentioned to them that I would only release it once I had their approval on the design. I put out a statement to my playtesters about this, saying that testing was paused and that the character's face may be changed considerably depending on what changes were asked, and switched to the public testing avatar to private. I did not name the artist in this statement to my testers. I did not receive a response from Rai, despite continuing to message them. Because of this, the only ethical thing to do was to redesign the entire face, and I informed them I would do this, but again received no response. I then redid the face, referencing only the original art by the creator of the Avali species, with some other 2D artists' interpretations mixed in. After sending Rai the redesign, another 3 weeks passed with no response, and so I released the avatar. Unquote. Okay, so for context, Hiyu did not use an AI engine to make this picture. Hiyu was not aware of the issue with the AI yet at the time that they did this. And Hiyu used one picture as reference for how to build the face. That was in part trained off of renders and pictures of Kita's models, which I'll put on screen for you here to see, over there. This picture was sent to Hiyu by a friend, since Hiyu didn't know much about Avali or how they looked when they decided to pick up this little prototype. They hadn't even decided to make a commercial product or not. Okay, so you can see this story and say, well, what then, Noto? What's the problem? Kita just didn't get back to Hiyu, right? No. Yeah, it gets worse. They did a bit more than that. Hiyu themselves started to hear from the community and friends that Kita was claiming that the released non-AI inspired SpiriVali that they redid the pattern and face for from scratch was AI generated, even though Hiyu stayed in contact, sending messages and pictures and updates, and even asked Kita if the new version was to their approval before releasing. Kita's Twitter account is still active. I checked it like 5 days ago. So they got these messages, they saw them, and then they chose to ignore them. So they knew. When I heard this story, it was actually what gave me the drive and passion to actually make this video and the next one. Having your work tarnished as AI generated or AI derived or whatever else over ignorance that you then sought to fix once you understood your mistake and had never profited off of this said mistake. Like, Hiyu admitted and was apologetic and fixed the mistake. And Kita decided, instead of understanding and engaging, they were going to go behind Hayu's back and instead make false, slanderous claims about their work. And I went around asking. I had 2 previous mods of a Vali army who wished to remain anonymous tell me that Kita was in the AA staff chats, a Vali army staff chats, claiming that it was AI, in fact. I was even able to find a public instance of them implying so, in fact, as well as one in private. For context, someone posted asking if anyone... For context on this public one, someone posted asking if anyone had any SpiriVali models that they wanted to show off in the wrong channel. Apparently linking to the SpiriVali store page in the question counted as advertising, so it needed to be in the advertising channel. But here's the thing. This turned into an argument between Kita and the user. And Kita felt the need to tack this onto the ban reason after they had an altercation. Quote, technically, given the origin of the avatar's face, feather, and original pattern design, it additionally breaks the no AI rule, unquote. The face, feather, and original design, which have all been redone and removed. So they know this, but they still chose to call it AI in a public space. So to clarify this argument, part of it included that the SpiriVali can't be posted in Kita's Gremlin house because it's AI. That's what that ruling is saying. You can't post the SpiriVali in Kita's Gremlin house because it's AI derived. This is public proof of what I've been told behind closed doors by mods and others, where Kita still considers it AI derived, they still consider it plagiarism, and they are completely okay with saying so in public in a defaming manner, in fact. I also want to point out that if someone saw this public statement in a vacuum and they took Kita's word for this, you'd assume the project they're referring to, the Kita Vali, was the SpiriVali was made using AI and an AI project and all the other negative connotations that come with that, right? Another source shared with me some direct screenshots of them spreading this misinformation in DMs during another confrontation, in fact. Quote, actually, there was AI used in the reference for the avatar's face. Break. A model based on AI still breaks the no AI rule. Break. Based on an image of an AI model trained on renders of my own avatar. Unquote. So, besides the fact that we're like 4 layers into plagiarism accusation territory, where Kita based their model off of 2D references of Vali, and the AI was fed pictures of the 3D models of Kita's avatar, which then the AI model spit out a 2D image of an Vali, which then Hiyu used as a reference for a 3D model. This is just for the sake of showing that they do say these things, and this is your direct proof that they knowingly have lied about the inclusion of AI aspects in the current released paid version of the SpiriVali, which at no point, this one, has ever had the face inspired by the AI. It's gone. It's kablooey. Kita knows this. They received the Twitter DMs. They've been corrected on this matter a couple times aside from that. They still repeat this lie. These messages were like a month after the Spiri's release. And much after Kita got all the messages informing them that the AI inspiration had been totally scrapped and expunged from the project before it was ever released for sale. Okay, another water break. Ooh, okay, I needed a water break. Where were we? Before it was ever released for sale. Yeah, okay. Now, as a side tangent, both of these creators are on Gumroad. I just want to point out that Gumroad's TOS goes as, you shall not take any action through the services that is misleading, false, defamatory, or libelous, like liability. Yeah. What does that mean? Libelous means defamatory in a way that exposes some person to public hatred or contempt or ridicule. Knowing the stigma of AI and how people feel about it, Kita would probably be aware that what they said would cause hatred or contempt in public, right? And that would influence people's decision to buy the SpiriVali or cause even more rumors of the same category. Granted, the TOS specifies it needs to be on Gumroad services for this to be enacted or a breach, but in another portion of Gumroad's documentation, it also mentions that Gumroad reserves the right to intercede on behalf of customers or creators when something like this happens. And I think they personally would want to look into one creator defaming another on a Discord that's featured in the purchase bar of the Gumroad by the defaming creator. I personally haven't made any reach out on Gumroad to this matter, but I am saying the potential is there, and Kita should be more careful about what they say about other creators in the future, because, if you're trying to make this your job and you're concerned about, the stability of your business model, breaking the TOS on the service that you're selling on is a bad decision. You probably shouldn't do that. Okay? Tangent over. The more I spoke with Hiyu, the more they revealed about their feelings and intentions. And the last 2 takes that I did of this section, I might have cried a little bit, so we're doing this one where I have calmed down. Quote, they brought up a legitimate mistake I had made, and after that I was disgusted by the face of the avatar and only released it once I knew that it was no longer tainted by generative AI work whatsoever. Break. From what I can tell in our DMs, Kita was aware of the kidney transplant as well. I was going through the worst time in my life when I began work on the avatar, literally dying with a tube dangling from my jugular vein when I had to connect to a dialysis machine every 2 days or die, and was still in the middle of the recovery from the transplant surgery when I picked the project back up. Break. I looked up to Kita. Their work has been so successful, and I found it so beautiful. It's what inspired me to see what I could do if I put my own mind towards an Avali model. Break. Every time I heard Kita was telling people this stuff about the work I'm proud of, stuff that's just untrue, I would get a days-long panic attack. It only stopped when blank name and some others finally convinced me that Rai doesn't actually care about artistic integrity. They just want shit they can say about other artists to prop themselves up. And that's really unfortunate, because their work meant so much to me. Unquote. Oh, man. Okay, that is the least emotional I've been able to take it, so we're just going to take it. And you probably noticed earlier, I put up a couple images of Hiyu's correspondence with Kita. If you didn't bother to pause and skim them, the brass tacks is Hiyu was apologizing up the ass and doing everything they could to correct the mistake. Unfortunately, they were unaware. They were only going to get a brick wall back. One brick wall that would tell everyone about their mistake, as if it was the SpiriVali they actually ended up releasing, which it wasn't. Hiyu was actually at an appointment from a post-operation blood test when they got their first message from Kita. The nurse was concerned that Hiyu was afraid of the needle, but they weren't. They were so nervous about Kita's message, right? This initial message where they were like, hey, this is not cool. This huge, monumental figurehead in the Avali community who's given us the Davali, the Jeravali, and the Kitavali, somebody that they looked up to, had dropped into their DMs, and instead of handling themselves with grace and being mindful of this smaller creator they were reaching out to, they just snapped their fingers partway through the conversation and decided that Hiyu was a bad AI user, and then went off to cry wolf to everybody that they could behind closed doors in the Avali Army chats and in DMs and even in public, right? This is what I'm talking about when I say that Kita is gatekeeping our community from talented modelers and people that are trying to break into this space. Kita militantly looks for fault, and when they get a shred of it, that's enough for them. It's honestly a miracle to me that Hiyu decided to keep supporting the SpiriVali after the owner of the now biggest Avali-centric Discord, after Avali armies being gone, and the community's biggest modeling figure, both, shit on their project when they did absolutely everything in their power to make it right. It's a miracle to me that Floof decided to keep going after they expressed to me how they felt that the entire community had just come down on them in that public channel about their topology being trash. It's a miracle to me that I was able to find 4 creators who had actually stuck with their projects in this community after being bothered in these varying degrees by Kita, because the other projects that I was able to track down, they're gone. These other people quit over this stuff, right? And I think that that's, I think that that might be the intention. I don't know. But it does look that way to me. Kita is punching down consistently, and they make a show of deflecting any wrongdoing in their behavior. There's no apologies for this stuff, even if they're wrong. I believe that they need an attitude adjustment, and they need to apologize to some of these creators for this. I've heard Kita's a good person from their friends, but I just wish that they would act like it. I also believe we need to hold community figureheads to a higher standard. If you're in Kita's Gremlin house or you're their friend, you need to be able and comfortable telling them when they've gone too far and need to make amends. Pleasing them and coddling them as if they've done nothing wrong only exacerbates this behavior further, and we get to miss out on even more people. Being a friend is being supportive, but it's also about helping your friend grow into a better person. You can't ignore this sort of thing, okay? And if you don't feel comfortable yielding out these critiques as fans or friends of Kita, you need to ask yourself why. Do you really want a friend that you can't criticize, right? Okay. Now, all of that said, I think Kita deserves a second chance. I really do. I'm not calling for a boycott or for all their friends to leave them or for this to turn into a shitstorm. What I am saying, this is their job. This is their full-time gig. This is their lifeblood. But we cannot tolerate this behavior. And it shouldn't go unanswered without apology to the direct developers affected by their attitude and behavior, okay? The intention here is to light a spark that will push us towards a more healthy community. And part of that is addressing these sorts of things. Because obviously, it hasn't worked privately for years. If my research is any indication, trying to address this privately has not worked so far. So this is the resort, okay? Additionally, Kita needs to rethink how they apply their TOS on derivative works. Someone looking at your model in part as a reference for how they're going to build a model of the same species and becoming upset and naming and banning them is not the way forward. As it was put to me by one of my sources, the Vali community is one of the only ones to get uppity about somebody inspiring their work off of another 3D model of the same species. Like, if a modeler is going to make a cougar, they're probably going to use a cougar model as reference. Okay, that is just how it works. And as previously shown, Kita's models don't significantly look different than the straight-up 2D resources provided by the actual creator of the Vali. Okay, I think the most significant deviation I noticed was that the JerryVali's ears are bigger, and you can see their undersides, which is not featured in most of the art on the official website. That's something that I noticed. That said, I am not saying that people should go into Kita's project files and copy paste stuff or, redistribute them or pirate them or reuse them in all of these ways that we know are actually plagiarism. But if somebody uses your model as a visual reference for how they want their Vali to look in part, that's not tracing, and that's not how derivative work actually is handled. If you look up derivative work on Wikipedia in copyright law and see that it's actually for copyrightable material, Kita, to my knowledge, does not have the copyright to a Vali in their general look. That's ridiculous. Tracing a 3D model would be taking the actual geometry and then molding your own geometry as a separate layer over the first one so that it matches try for try, more or less. You'd put me like in a body cast and then use that cast to mold your almost an exact. That would be tracing. Somebody looking at pictures of your friggin' model is not the same thing. Looking at it in Unity or Blender and then being like, oh, okay. It's not the same. Now, I know this video is already going to be super long, so I'll just leave it there. Um, I I am still deciding on if I want to make that follow up about the personal comments that they've made about me and the way that they've behaved in the wake of a Vali army. I have the script ready to go. Whatever, we'll see. I thought that this was important enough because of the other people that are being affected by it that I wanted to get it out there. It's really not cool. I heard Hiyu's story and I just, okay, I'm upset now. Let's go do a little investigation, and this is what I uncovered. Okay. Thanks for watching if you got this far. Thanks to everyone who shared their thoughts with me. Without you, this behavior would have continued unchallenged and left the VR chat of Ollie space probably a bit emptier as a result of all this frisking everybody has to go through when they try to make something. A very special thanks to Hiyu for having the bravery to share their story. Adios. Okay. Before you get on my ass, what did you get yourself into this time, Noda? This is something else, okay?